Body snatching in Yharnam is dangerous work. On the night of the hunt, coffins are locked up tight by wrapping them in chains, not to protect the dead, but to protect the living who are yet to be infected by the beast's plague. Most weapons aren't capable of killing the beasts, and so it is that rotting yet animated corpses of infected citizens, dispatched with these crude methods, roam the sewers of Yharnam. But we, the hunter, desire no more than to harvest these corpses and partake in their diseased blood, for there is unprecedented power in this fearsome flesh and blood, and this power will lead us closer to the truth. In this challenge, the only rule is that I must use body parts as weapons and nothing else, so no guns allowed. Each body part may be used for 3 bosses before I have to switch to a different weapon. However, I may still use these weapons to clear out basic enemies and chalice bosses. Chalice bosses won't count towards the 3 boss limit. Also, as long as I am not doing damage with a weapon, I can still equip it for other reasons. For example, if I want to utilize healing gems on a weapon I've already used 3 times without sacrificing damage on my main weapon, I'm allowed to do so. The theme here is we're playing as a body snatcher, meaning we snatch corpses from their graves for dissection. But we're scavenging body parts and turning them into special weapons. Just what kind of research is going on here? And so it is with these unclear motives that we set off to Yharnam to begin our research. Here we are in central Yharnam. The only body parts we have are our own until we pillage the graves of the old gods. Our fists aren't the best, but we have no choice but to use them until we get past Vicar Amelia and unlock some new weapons. There's not really anything we need to get in Yharnam, so our only goal now is to stay alive long enough to get all our shortcuts and start preparing for Father Gascoigne. As I go through central Yharnam, I make conversation with whoever I can find as I descend into the sewers. The one good thing about fists is visceral attacks. Unlike the other games, critical damage is not calculated based on the weapon, but rather on your character's overall level and the skill stat. This means that fists will always have decent critical damage after a backstab, making them a viable weapon against smaller groups of enemies, or against slower ones like this pig. Fists are also really quick, which means you actually get more backstab opportunities than you would with a regular weapon. Seeing the damage on regular attacks, it's clear that this is what I'll have to do to beat Father Gascoigne, unless I want to be here for an hour. Initially, I expected this fight to only take a few tries. Backstabbing doesn't sound that hard in theory, and it's not like he has that much health. However, this ended up being the first roadblock of the run, and it's only the first boss fight. And I can't forget that once I do this, I still have 2 more bosses that I need to fist. But let's focus on the problem at hand. After several hours of failed backstabs, the first thing I figured out was that I was screwing myself over by locking on. Not doing this gives you the freedom to aim the fist yourself when you're facing away from him. It takes lots of practice, but eventually you'll be able to feel the backstabs, if that makes sense. Even if you can't see exactly where the hurt box is, you'll know how to angle it right into the booty, no matter where your character is facing in relation to Gascoigne. This is why it was better in my experience to release the lock for this, because while you're still charging your attack, you can tap your stick at the last moment to quickly pivot it towards him. Now that we know how to backstab him reliably, we need to know what our main openings are. If you're skilled enough, I'm sure you can find openings in pretty much all of his attacks, but for me, I played it safe and stuck with a few attacks that I knew I could punish. The first move you always want to look out for is the one where he starts dragging his axe along the ground. After he does this, he will always follow it up with a jump, so if you start walking towards him as he jumps, you should be in a perfect position to backstab him every time. The next move we want to punish is his rolling attack. Eventually you'll know what it looks like and be able to punish it 90% of the time. After he rolls and quickly drags his axe along the ground, he will follow it up with another slash that leaves his back turned. With proper spacing, this should be an easy backstab opportunity. If you're too far away, your fist won't quite reach him, but it's not as hard as it looks. You may not get every backstab, but once you have the muscle memory, most of your attempts will start landing. Since we've got the timing and spacing down on our biggest backstab opportunities, the rest of the fight can be played passively, keeping an eye out for any other lucky windows we get for some opportunistic backstabs. You may have noticed that I changed my outfit and brought along the music box. Initially, I was going to try to do this without the music box, but I got a little impatient and figured just a few freebies wouldn't hurt. I did both of those things off camera because the emulator started glitching and the footage was practically unwatchable, but at least nothing super important was done during that time. But anyways, I mainly want to use the music box to minimize the time I'm spending in Phase 2 and get to Phase 3 as quickly as possible. Phase 3 starts off with a free backstab window. Just make sure you don't get knocked back by the AoE while you approach. From here, we'll have one more chance to use the music box for a free backstab, so we'll do that. And now we'll have to stop being a coward and fight him at close range in order to get backstabs in this phase. In theory, this should be the easier phase to backstab in since he's a bigger target, but I found myself having a bit of trouble landing any backstabs aside from a few lucky instances. I started panicking once he was just one more backstab away from death, and I almost died a few times, but the most tense moment in the fight was certainly this one where he put me in the vortex. I was extremely lucky that he knocked me slightly out of range and let me escape the chain. At this point, I got a hold of myself and started calming down and focusing on attacking whenever I could rather than fishing for backstabs. I tried to go for one more and almost died because of it, but since I hit him anyway, his health was low enough for one more charged R2 to finish the job. After this, I finally allowed myself to get some levels. First, we'll put them into strength and skill for future weapon requirements. Right now, we don't have any weapons, so we have to plan our actions very carefully now that we only have 2 more uses of our bare fists. In order to open the entire Cathedral ward, we need to defeat either the Cleric Beast to unlock the Hunter Chief's emblem, or the Bloodstarved Beast to unlock the door to the old workshop. I chose the latter, since that seemed like it would be more beneficial in the long run. We can unlock several areas if we clear Old Yharnam, as well as the Chalice dungeons in case we need extra resources. So, Bloodstarved Beast it is, down to Old Yharnam we go. Luckily for us, she can be backstabbed as well, which is a rarity for beast-type bosses. Getting backstabs here is even easier than it was on Father Gascoigne, which is a pleasant surprise as I was admittedly pretty scared of facing this with fists alone. Pretty much all of her attacks can be avoided by dodging to the right, sometimes simply walking around her left leg is enough. She doesn't have too many attacks, so it's easy to bait out the ones you want for those sweet backstab opportunities. Her grab attack is super telegraphed and easy to recognize. As soon as she starts the animation, you should already be circling around and preparing to charge your attack. Once Phase 2 starts, not too much changes. She gets a little more aggressive, but don't let her scare you. She's just as vulnerable to backstabs as she was in the first phase. Just in case, I equipped some pungent cocktails if I need to get her off my back. Honestly, I feel like I could have wrapped this up on my first attempt, but sadly, the emulator is not entirely stable yet, so my game crashed and I had to start over. That crushed my morale a little, but it's nothing I can't come back from. I got my face eaten off a few times, but at least I was consistently reaching the 3rd phase. I tend to only use the cocktails for this part because of the poison aura. Using them for openings didn't really work, since all it does is make her movement less predictable, so I had to use them defensively to buy time while I waited for some of the poison aura to fade. That way I can use my antidotes while she's distracted, so there's less of a chance of being instantly poisoned when she approaches me. From here, it's the same as Phase 1. All I have to do is be patient and wait for the grab. Once she does that, I reach in to claim victory from the bowels of the beast. That's enough blood echoes for a few more levels. We'll just get some more strength before we set off for the Cathedral ward. Of course, before we do anything else, we need to drop off of the lift to get to the upper level and claim the Formless Odin rune. We can't use it yet, but it will be very useful in the future. Other than a few other runes, there isn't much we need to get from this section yet, so for now, all I really want to do is make it to the other side and start getting ready for Amelia. Once I make it to the last lift, I make sure I have the gate open, and then I climb up the ladder for the numbing mists, which will be very important. The last thing I want to do before the fight is get all the NPCs out of the way, starting with the old woman in Yharnam. The only one who's not coming with us is the old man, but that's his fault. Shouldn't have doubted me. When everybody's been collected, I'll get a few more levels into strength before I literally try my hand at Vicar Amelia. It took several attempts for me to make any progress at all on this fight, Most attempts went like the first one here, where I barely tickled her and got one shot by the head slam. That's okay though. I can accept that I'll have to learn her moves very well in order to beat her with just fists. The only problem I have with fists at the moment is that even though I've been leveling strength, a fully charged R2 is doing 8 damage to her, and that's just not gonna cut it, especially when I have to deal with her healing later down the line. So I looked into it and learned something new about fists in this game. Apparently, they do scale very well with both strength and skill. However, the scaling doesn't start picking up until you hit 19 in either one. From there, it will scale rapidly until it soft caps at 30, and this applies to both stats separately. For example, I chose to level strength, and as you can see, once it hits 19, the damage from my fist starts increasing by 2 points a level. So, if I were to get skill to 19 as well, the same thing would happen, even if I already reached the soft cap for the strength scaling. After a decent bit of farming in Yahar'gul, I reached the soft cap in strength and decided it was time to try Amelia again. My damage was already starting to look a little better, but once I had gotten a taste of what I had been missing, I couldn't help but to push my damage even further. Of course, this came after a few more hours of attempts when I had started to get very burnt out and needed to give myself a break. So I decided to do even more farming, which in Bloodborne means the farmer's gotta stick his hand up the pig's ass. By now, my damage was gradually improving since the skill stat had surpassed 19, but I was also gradually improving and even stopped getting clipped by the same slam move every time. Well, for the most part. The most important thing is I'm finally doing enough damage to stagger her and open her up for a visceral attack, which I promptly missed. Although I hadn't been getting to phase 2 that many times, as you can see from the fact that I still have some numbing mists left, the fact that I was getting there at all meant that progress was being made, even if it was a painfully slow process. I ended up wasting all of the numbing mist that I thought would be so useful because I wasn't prepared to deal with her new attacks in the second phase. So, for the final time, I bit the bullet and brought skill to 30 to bring fist damage to the soft cap. I also got a little more health after this off camera, which I probably should have done on the first day I attempted this. By now, I had been fighting her for a couple of days and had finally developed a strategy that had to work. Before, I was fighting her inefficiently, breaking limbs randomly, and not caring about the order in which I broke them. Her legs are the easiest part of her to hit, so naturally that's what I hit the most, and since damaging her legs will stagger her, I was getting the visceral earlier than I needed to and inadvertently making the fight harder. What I figured out was that it was much better to maximize the damage I could do in phase 1, since I had memorized her entire moveset. I wanted to maximize damage without staggering her, so I actively avoided the legs and tried to only hit her head and arms, breaking them one by one. Her prayer slam that once gave me a lot of trouble had become my favorite attack to see because it was such a good opening. As long as you're close to her, you can safely dodge to her side and hit any of her limbs with a heavy attack. Aside from that, her grab and her long-range leap were the best times to do charged attacks. For all her other moves, I stuck with quick jabs, but with my stats, even those were doing decent damage. Once her health was nearing the halfway point, I started to focus on her legs for the visceral. After I got it, I could do some more damage during the phase transition, which is just when she roars. I got pretty greedy and did end up getting caught in a grab, and it was probably that extra vitality I got that saved me here. For phase 2, you need aggression and a lot of good luck. If you create even the tiniest amount of distance, she will try to heal. And yes, she is also very aggressive if you fight up close, but we have no other choice but to tough it out and hope she spams the more punishable stuff. The video couldn't quite capture all that I had to go through, but trust me when I say that this gesture resonated throughout my soul. Nothing is going to be as much of a challenge as this was going forward since I'll be able to use weapons, but I feel like I've truly earned the right to use them, even if I was disgustingly overleveled. So beautiful was the arm that dragged me to this nightmarish plane of existence, inspiring awe and fear alike, a trait from which the arm's master derives her name. As a body snatcher, I wanted nothing more than to have this Amygdalan arm for myself, and so I snatched it from one of the many corpses that litter the nightmare and began to make from it a special weapon, Here, our research begins. Let's see what this arm is truly capable of. I have collected an ungodly amount of upgrade materials from farming the kidnappers earlier, so I have plenty of twin shards to get it to +6 already. But yet, in my endless quest for knowledge, I'm not satisfied with borrowing the power of just a single great one. No, there are many more appendages to be torn from the corpses of the gods. With the tonsil stone, we can get grabbed by Amygdala again to go into the nightmare. Again. First, I made sure to open the shortcut to Yosefka's clinic. We'll be needing to pay her a visit soon. Inside the Nightmare Lecture Building, I pick up the Augur of Ebrietis so that we may borrow some of her power as well. There won't be too many things we need to upgrade in this run, so I might as well use some of the chunks I have on me to bring the arm to +7. By now, I've picked up better blood gems to put in too. This weapon does have some arcane damage, but is still primarily a strength scaling weapon, so I'm prioritizing physical damage gems. Now, we return to the Nightmare Frontier to challenge Amygdala with the severed arm of her brethren. She didn't take kindly to the gesture. The Amygdalan arm itself is ironically very effective against her, mostly in its transformed mode. The transformed mode is interesting. Appearance-wise, it reminds me of a scythe, but moveset-wise, it plays like a whip. Either way, it has great range and does a lot of damage here. +7 might be a bit much for this fight, though. I was doing so much damage by breaking her limbs that I managed to skip the last phase after the visceral attack. I'll take it, though. I really need the ailing Laurence chalice that's gatekeeping one of my special weapons. Leveling up is going to be very easy from here on out. The only stat I really need to worry about is Arcane. Now it's time to indulge in a little dungeon diving, an old pastime of mine, so we can gather the materials we need to perform the ritual. Although I personally enjoy going through chalice dungeons, I can understand how the repetitive nature can be boring for others, so I didn't show much of it on camera. All you need to know is that once I cleared out the first couple Tumerian labyrinths, I had enough blood echoes to reach 18 arcane and be able to use the Augur of Ebrietis. The first boss we'll test it out on is the Witch of Hemwick, as it would be nice to start equipping some runes. I honestly wasn't expecting the damage to be that good even against this, but my expectations were shattered, in a good way. In fact, this fight went so well that she didn't even have time to revive her clone, and if you're curious, this fight took just over 2 minutes, and I didn't even have to replenish any bullets. We probably could have made even better time without the clones, but at least it was still an easy fight. After this, we'll move on to a fight that has never been easy for me, the Undead Giant in the Lower Tumerian Dungeon. Why am I fighting this? Well, unfortunately, I need to get past it to collect a specific type of ritual blood that I need to make my Laurence chalice. I don't really enjoy this fight since I'm essentially just poking it the entire time while it does the same move, but once you get the hang of it, it actually isn't super hard, just tedious. Turns out I could have ignored that guy and just farmed the kidnappers on the earlier layers, because when I realized that the preset loot wasn't enough ritual blood for, I ended up farming a kidnapper on the 3rd layer anyway. Oh well, at least by the time I finally made it to my precious beast claw, I had a lot of blood echoes. Now then, looks like it's time to get back on track and progress through the main story, so we're off to the Forbidden Woods. I did get a few things done here. This mostly consisted of riding lifts and opening gates, but I did find this upstanding gentleman here and decided to send him down to the clinic. I mean, he seems like a nice guy, let's help him out. There's not much else that I really need from this level, but I will pick up both variants of the Metamorphosis rune that can be found here. The Shadows of Yharnam and I go back a long way. I used to hate these guys so much, and I'll never forget how much trouble they gave me on my first playthrough. After all these years, my hatred for these guys has not died out, and now I remember why. They are pretty annoying. Augur of Ebrietis should be good against them since it can parry them, and they are very easy to parry. But on the other hand, it's very easy to dodge, and they are very good at dodging. Bullet management is going to be important here, so that means I can't be missing or getting hit too much, as my health is essentially free ammo. Naturally, I do both things. Even though I was doing okay on my first attempt, it was eating up my vials very quickly. After a little while, I came up with a foolproof plan. Remember that tier gem I got from the Hunter's Workshop earlier? Well, I can equip it on my Amygdalan arm to gradually regenerate my health, and it won't be breaking any rules. After all, I won't be attacking with it. The regen you get from this gem is really slow, but it's still infinite bullets, so I'll take it. This time, I changed my strategy a bit and decided to focus on killing the most aggressive one first instead of trying to kill all three at the same time. I don't know why I even thought something like that would work with this setup. I did bring the others to around the same amount of health and then started going for the caster, since he's the weakest of the bunch. Now there's only one guy left in the final phase, which should make the snake bit much easier. I still don't really know what I'm doing here, so the only advice I can give is to get good or get lucky. The Blood Moon will be out soon. Before then, we need to take care of imposter Yosefka to get the better reward. It's become quite populated in here, thanks to me, but even after all I've done, she refuses to share her research with me. So I suppose I'll have to do things the hard way to get information out of her. Look at this idiot. She has the tools of the gods at her disposal, yet she hasn't the slightest idea how to use them. Don't worry, Yosefka. Your research is in more capable hands now. With my little errand done, I can depart for Cainhurst. There aren't any weapons to collect or anything, but there are a ton of bloodstone chunks. Ma'am, I think you forgot something. While I'm here, I'll try to kill every one of these gargoyles that I can. The drop rate for chunks isn't that bad. Plus, it's always nice to have a surplus of echoes after fully clearing out an area. I'm taking a break with Arcane to level my health some more. It's getting to the point in the game where neglecting it is starting to catch up to me. My weapon of choice for ROM is the Beast Claw, which is now +7 after our visit to Cainhurst Castle. In its transformed mode, the Beast Claw automatically builds up the Beasthood meter, so I need to take advantage of this feature by equipping both Beast runes. Combined with Bolt Paper, the DPS on these bad boys is gonna be insane. This was probably the easiest ROM fight of my entire life. Depleting her health only took a few seconds, and I probably could have done this in less than a minute if I wasn't trying to maneuver around the spiders. The Blood Moon has risen. The whole town has become a nightmare by now, so it hardly makes a difference if I choose to continue through Yharnam or go deeper into the Hunter's Nightmare. Within the Hunter's Nightmare, I'll find more weapons to face the monstrosities beckoned by Mensis, but I'll have to get past Ludwig first. I think the Beast Claw strategy we use for Rom will also work well here. He has very chunky hind legs that are easy to break in rapid succession. I still have a good bit of muscle memory from this fight, but even so, it was a lot simpler than I remembered. I practically spammed my way straight into Phase 2 with the Beasthood meter, but once he regained some of his sanity, he wasn't having it anymore. The tables have turned. He is the practiced swordsman with an immaculate technique, whereas I have let the Beast Claws take full control and reduce me to a bloodthirsty animal. Mindlessly dodging into him and mashing R1 may have worked for the first phase, but that'll just put you straight in the path of his sword in the second one, and so will dodging away, apparently. Maybe I should time them better and dodge around them instead. Or I could get Claw Mark and try to stagger him before he has time to do anything. I think that strategy ended up working out pretty well. The research hall is open, and soon we will be able to witness the horrific secrets it hides. Perhaps the most horrific of all is what is in this very cathedral, but we'll get to that later. For now, we need to navigate through an onslaught of church hunters to take from them the knowledge they guard so jealously. Some of them seem determined to guard it no matter what. The hunter on the stairs just wouldn't die no matter where I pushed him. It may be better to ignore the hunter for now and take the brain fluid while he can't get me. Adeline's quest is perhaps the most important one in the run, so we need to get started with that before we do anything else. Once I've initiated the quest, I can continue through the area to collect more brain fluid as I go. I also got a chance to cheese this hunter after all by using this poor undying patient here as a meat shield. It's a pretty short area, so it doesn't take long to clear it out and go back to the hunter's dream to get some more health before living failures. I have chosen what is perhaps the worst weapon I have for this particular situation. My Amygdalan arm deals blunt and arcane damage, both of which the living failures are strong against. It may be best to stick with a transformed mode for this fight as well. However, it's not entirely useless in club mode either. Fully charging in R2 will stun a living failure, and with how slow they move, it's not exactly hard to find a decent opening. Aside from this, it's also pretty easy to backstab them with it. Since I have Claw Mark on, I just focused on that and carefully separated the casters from the rest of the pack to pick them off one at a time. Eventually, they all become casters when they stop to summon the meteorites. This attack used to scare me, but I remembered that there's a blind spot right in front of the tree. Once you learn that, this attack is quite pathetic if you think about it. They're trying as hard as they can, but all their efforts amount to is a free backstab for me. As the fight came to a close, I used the transformed mode more often. I'd keep my distance and let a few of them get just close enough to be in the arm's range, so I could damage a few at a time. I had almost forgotten about the Cleric Beast by now, but luckily I still have one more use of the Augur of Ebrietis, so let's kill it now just for fun. At least the poor thing got a couple hits in before dying. Up next is Lady Maria, and admittedly, I've never fought her without parrying, so this should be interesting. This is where I'll be spending my third and final use of the Amygdalan arm. First, I'll try out the transformed moveset and see how that goes for me. The wind-up is a bit slow for this fight, and I kept getting interrupted. Since I don't really need the extra range, I think it would be better to stick with the default form of the weapon. Yeah, the difference is crazy. On the first attempt I could barely get a hit in, but now I'm bullying her with this thing. Aside from a few moves she has with hyper armor, now she's the one that's not getting a chance to do anything, especially not in the first phase. While she transitions to phase 2, we have a bit of time to get some free hits in. This AoE is very weak, so we'll even have enough time to move back in after dodging the Blood Blast. Once you get used to her moves, they're surprisingly linear. A simple quick step to the side was enough to dodge most of her combos, and even though her combos are very long, if you dodge the first few hits, later hits won't realign and you should be okay to punish her from there. Phase 3 is mostly the same, but you do have to be a bit more careful because all of her attacks will leave behind a fire trail that can catch you off guard if you're too eager to punish her. And she can stagger you, and unlike most NPCs, she never misses a visceral. But I didn't mind because the animation is really cool and it didn't do too much damage anyway. I expected to die a lot more to this fight, but this one only took 2 attempts. Because as it turns out, if you get one good dodge, you can kind of mash her to death with a weapon like this. After giving Adeline her second brain fluid, she'll give us the balcony key we need to get one of 2 hunter tools tied to her quest, the blacksky eye. I'm waiting until the very last minute to finish her quest because I'd like to collect her blood for as long as I can. Even though it shoots a meteor from within the eye, you can see from the animation that the eye and the meteorite essentially combine into one projectile, so I think we can count it as a body part here. Besides, eyes are complicated in this game. In any case, now that we have the blacksky eye, we can continue through the base game and start going through Yahar Ghul. The first thing I like to do is take care of the gank squad by locking myself up and cheesing them out from inside the gates. Once we've gotten our second copy of Claw Mark and all the hunters have been cleared, there's not much else to do around here, so let's make our way towards the One Reborn. Well, this is certainly taking resurrectionism to a new level. It probably isn't worth it to kill every single bell ringer since they don't really do much, but I did it anyway despite it being a blatant waste of my bullets. Sometimes they drop bullets when they die and you'll get back what you spent, but of course no matter how much I level my arcane, I hardly ever get lucky enough for that to happen. It may have been a bad idea to use the eyes here. This boss is very resistant to arcane despite being a not so great one. On top of this, it's one of the tankier bosses in the base game, so this whole fight is going to be a slog. I wasn't being resourceful with my vials and bullets, and ended up having to leave because of how little damage I was doing. I'm going to have to use the tier gem strategy from earlier for some health regen, and I also don't feel comfortable carrying around all these blood echoes, so I might as well put them to good use and get some more arcane for a little extra damage. If things start to go wrong, we can always retreat to the stairs where it can't hit us to let the tier gem do some work. I don't know why I didn't have my Formless Odin rune equipped already, but while I'm thinking about it, I can actually get a second one from killing a certain NPC in the Cathedral. Now, which one of you drops it again? I'll just kill you both. Since my whole game plan is to back up and spam low damage projectiles, I lost my patience very easily. But it's okay, there's actually one more improvement I can make to my Amygdalan arm. I missed a triangular pulsing gem in the research hall that can stack with the tier gem for faster regen. This one also has more powerful regen than the tier gem by default. Something I noticed was that I seemed to be doing more damage when I targeted the middle part of the body rather than the head, and I expected it to be the other way around. Targeting the middle is better regardless, because the main body is at an angle that makes a lot of projectiles miss, and the last thing I want to do is waste bullets and be stuck here even longer. The One Reborn is a pretty nothing burger boss, so I'm not surprised that it was even less exciting with projectiles. I assumed if those scholars were snatching all these corpses, they would be up to something grand, but I've only been met with disappointment. Perhaps that's why I no longer bother myself with scavenging parts off of regular humans. We do get something out of this, however. After this fight, bloodstone chunks will be available in the insight shop, so I can finally make use of the insight I've been hoarding for the whole run. After upgrading the Beast Claw to +9, we're ready to set out to the fishing hamlet, where greater discoveries await us. Our claws do very well here. For the infamous shark enemy, it won't be killed in a single visceral, but the charged attack of the claws is fast enough to backstab them a second time and nullify the threat. And of course, most of the other enemies around here can be taken out without issues, and if we have trouble with anything, we can always fall back to our hunter tools and use blacksky eye to kill them from a safe distance. Now, for what is the pinnacle of a body snatcher's career, I find myself before the corpse of Kos herself. But unfortunately for me, her vengeful orphan will allow no further desecration. He is determined to keep us away from the sacred resting place of his mother. As such, all of his attacks are full of hatred and will hit very hard. With this in mind, using the transformed mode of the claws may be a bad idea, so I switched to the regular form for this fight. After a couple attempts, I remembered that there's a blood rock down here, and if there's anything worth ascending to +10 for, it's Orphan of Kos. During phase 1, he's not super aggressive and can easily be baited into doing the jump attack for a backstab opportunity. As always, you want to keep your punishes brief, because he can take your whole health bar in the blink of an eye. Getting to phase 2 isn't so bad, but once we get there, the pace of the fight changes and he'll relentlessly chase us down. However, the longer his combos are, the more vulnerable he is to a backstab. I died a few times already and was running low on bolt paper, so I decided to save it for phase 2 since phase 1 is relatively easy. He's also still vulnerable when he summons the lightning, but unluckily for me, I was not far enough out to be out of its range. That messed up my rhythm for sure, but I managed to keep my cool and survive just long enough to dodge another combo and finish the job. After examining the corpse of the mother, I contracted a strange parasite. Nothing of consequence to the untrained eye, but for me, this was the greatest thing I had ever discovered. Years of research have all culminated in this very moment. I have been chosen. I have ascended to cauliflower. I can now use things that a regular human cannot. See things unseen to human eyes. Naturally, a weapon made from cosmic parasites does pure arcane damage, and won't benefit from the gems I've collected up to this point, which are mostly physical types. We need to start collecting appropriate gems for the Kos parasite. It turns out I missed one back in the fishing hamlet, however, it's the wrong shape for the weapon. Not to worry, there's a solution to this. All we have to do is make our way to the secret messenger bath in the Chalice dungeons and buy the uncanny parasite, which has a triangular gem slot. I originally only came to the upper Cathedral ward to pick up the ritual blood, but since there are 2 bosses down here, we may as well go ahead and fight them. The first weapon I'll be trying out is the accursed brew we got from the villager. This brew is actually the skull of a villager who was searched for eyes. This villager's resentment of Bergenworth persists long after death, materializing into a violent explosion of curses when thrown. The splash damage is really good against groups of enemies. For example, if all these little guys are getting in your way when you're trying to lock on to the main celestial emissary, you can blast them all away in a single throw. Well, except for this one little straggler, this guy was more determined than the boss was. Moving on to Ebrietis, the first thing I noticed was that there were some interesting particle effects in here that I definitely don't remember being on the PS4. I can't complain though, it's been running on 60 FPS this whole time, which you also can't get on the PS4. I tried to not let it distract me too much, but I did end up switching back to 30 FPS for this particular fight because it was making the game very laggy. Anyways, here is where we're testing out the Kos parasite for the first time. I mean that in a literal sense, as I've never done a boss fight with this weapon before. It's definitely a strange weapon. This is the only weapon where it feels like the weapon is using you, and not the other way around. We are a host to parasites. It only makes sense that they've taken control of our body. I'm kind of amazed by how well the developers conveyed this concept with the animations, even down to the way it changes your movement when equipped. Ebrietis isn't as resistant to arcane damage as I thought she would be, so the damage here wasn't actually that bad. The special transformed attack was pretty useless though, so I didn't bother doing that with how risky it is to pull off. I mainly stuck with the untransformed moveset and relied on dash attacks for some extra range. Doing this, I was able to damage her head consistently and land a visceral early on. I mainly struggled in the second phase because I kept getting hit by a call beyond. Turns out I was overthinking it and all you have to do is keep running. I eventually started to use the same strategy I had used on Vicar Amelia, which was to damage her limbs first, and delay the visceral as much as possible so the second phase isn't so daunting. Strafing to her side while attacking invalidates most of her moveset, aside from the charge and the occasional tentacle swipe. Once she started the second phase, I had done enough damage for the visceral attack. From here, we can keep up the aggression and break her limbs again if we need to, and that should do it. Before I get to the final parts of the game, I have a few optional bosses I still need to check off the list. We can use the Accursed Brew to take care of them, starting with Darkbeast Paarl. I'm a little over-leveled for this section of the game, so this fight lasted approximately 35 seconds. Apparently Paarl is even weaker to arcane than it is to fire, so that certainly helped. I turned this fight into a free game practice session, even though I won't be using what I learned anytime soon. Especially not against a smaller target like, say, Martyr Logarius. The damage is definitely not bad, but I've never fought him with a hunter's tool before, and since they use bullets, I am a little worried about phase 2 when he starts deflecting projectiles. I don't know if it applies to Accursed Brew or not, so I'll have to play and find out. Well, there's my answer. Guess I'm gonna have to deal with it. Okay, Logarius, what the hell is this? My only source of damage is bullets, which I currently can't use since he deflects them with his aura, so at this point, he's just being mean for meanness' sake. I have played this game many times and have never seen him stick the sword inside the roof. What a great start to making Bloodborne videos this has been. While the first attempt seemed like it would set a bad precedent for the fight, the second attempt went in the complete opposite direction of the first one. I got extremely lucky because he never once tried to put down the sword after the initial phase change. I came more prepared than last time and put on my Odin runes so I could carry more bullets. Staying in his face made it more likely for him to spam melee attacks during phase 2. On the first attempt, I was far too passive and was letting him get all his buffs. But anyways, that ended up not being a problem after all. And since I need to finish up with Alfred's quest, I might as well finish with Eileen since she's right across the courtyard. The Bloody Crow of Cainhurst can be a tough opponent, but with a numbing mist and some scummy tactics, he doesn't have to be. The Hunter rune will boost stamina recovery speed, so that'll be a nice alternative for when we don't need to have the Milkweed equipped. Now we can give Alfred the summons to finish his quest, but most of all, get a pointy hat. Yeah. That'll do it, Alfred. Looks like you finally got all those vile bloods. Oops. Okay, we're all done with quests and optional bosses in the base game, so let's go finish with the second floor of the lecture building. This is the place I've chosen to spend the other 2 uses of Blacksky Eye. The path to Mikolash wasn't super eventful, so let's get straight into the fight and see how this one goes. Now, I have fought him with Blacksky Eyes before, but since I only used them at the cheese spot, it didn't really count. So I'm curious to see how they'll do against the first phase of the fight. Well, at least the damage is good. Now we just gotta catch him again. Mikolash? Are you already broken? Well, okay then, I guess this spell just completely destroys his AI. If you spam it non-stop, he doesn't really know what to do. He broke out of my spell for just a moment, but then I found him again. The man wants eyes. Let's grant that final wish of his. Alright, after that wonderful performance from Mikolash, I'm not expecting the wet nurse to be much more of a threat. Her first phase went similarly to Mikolash's. I kept slowly backing away to outspace her while I spammed my projectiles. She can sidestep them, but most of the time it fails since she's such a big target. All was going well until I had to recharge my bullets while she was summoning her clones. Everything started to spiral out of my control from this point. But after a couple more attempts, I lucked out and managed to kill her before her clones had time to get me. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Mama's gonna buy you an umbilical cord third. Before we leave for the final bosses, we must drop the brain on a chain so we can get the other blood rock. I've been putting it off as much as I can, but unfortunately, it's time for Laurence. Naturally, I'll be getting the best fire resistance armor available, but I also need the key item itself to trigger the fight. Once I've done that, I use a combination of the Bone Ash set and Yamamura's set for the highest possible fire defense. Laurence was the bane of my existence the very first time I played the DLC, and though I've learned a lot since those days, the fear has left an indentation on my very being, something from which there is no deliverance. It's even scarier fighting him with a weapon I'm not used to. Like I said, I've never used this weapon at all before this run, and it feels really weird to be using it here. The Kos Parasite gives you this sluggish feeling, both in terms of its moveset and the unique dodging animations. From what I've read online, it only keeps you in the dodge animation longer, hence why it looks so slow, in exchange for lower instability damage, which means if you get hit mid-dodge, your damage will be reduced instead of increased. Other than that, not much has changed about your dodge, but this change isn't so insignificant as to not noticeably interrupt the flow of battle, at least for me. All I'm saying is it certainly takes some getting used to, but once you adjust, it is a lot of fun. In order to manage my stamina in the midst of all these swipes and slams, I'm going to be using the standard moveset of the Parasite. The DPS isn't that high, but if we keep poking and pelvic thrusting away, the damage will add up. The transformed version expands the moveset quite a bit, but it takes up a ton of stamina even for R1 attacks. This weapon also has very low rally potential by default, so I had to put on the guidance runes I picked up in the other parts of the DLC. As for the fight itself, the first attempt went a lot better than I expected. I ended up making it to phase 3. This part is always the hardest for me, even though his moveset becomes a lot simpler. It's mainly because I spend a lot of time stalling trying to find an opening and gradually losing all of my vials getting hit by stupid stuff. A couple attempts later, and I finally started to get the hang of the third phase. For one thing, I stopped locking on entirely and focused on circling around him in a clockwise motion. There should be a small gap between him and the lava you can stay in while you wait for the attack to finish. Once you know what you're doing, this phase is much easier. For me, the only threatening attack he has is the delayed slam. That one can be tricky to master the timing for. Sometimes, if I got hit, I would run to the opposite side of the room and let my Amygdalan arm do some healing. This also would encourage him to do the super punishable lava spit attack. Maybe Laurence doesn't have to be scary after all. For the final boss, I will use my third and final use of the Kos Parasite. This will be for both encounters, so I'll technically be using this one 4 times. Starting with Gehrman, I'm excited to finally get some use out of the transformed moveset and the weapon art. For 2 bullets, you can use L2 to do an AoE. The range isn't huge, but shouldn't have problems hitting bosses, especially if they are already approaching you. You don't want to do it too close to Gehrman because he can retaliate very quickly, so wait for him to start dashing up to you, and you should have plenty of time to charge it up. AoE aside, the rest of the transformed moveset has great range and stagger potential. Basically anything you throw out will stagger a humanoid enemy like him. Just like with Maria, we have a generous window to get in some free hits before he transforms for his final phase. He's going to be a little more aggressive in this phase, but that's not really a bad thing for us. Although he can parry the AoE, so be careful about spamming that. We finish him with another AoE, and now, we simply wait for the moon presence to descend for one last battle. She tries to envelop us, but to no avail, because we have eyes on the inside. Hey, why is the screen fading to black? Wait. Oh god, somebody help, I've forgotten my umbilical cords. This wasn't quite the ending I envisioned for the run, but if this is the way it must be, then I will stay in the hunter's dream as Cauliflower, to guide a new generation of hunters, so that one may someday carry out the rest of my research. Thank you everyone for watching this video until the end. I'm so glad I've finally gotten to play Bloodborne on this channel, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. I can't wait to make even more Bloodborne videos now that it's an option, but of course, there will still be many more videos about Demon Souls, Dark Souls, and Elden Ring, if that's more of your thing. I'll see you all next time!